Well, hello there. My name is Bruce Bishop, and I'm standing in for Louise O'Connell today on her show, The Author Journey. And I'm delighted, obviously, to be interviewing my friend and co-author, Anne. Not a co-author with her new book, but just a fellow author, I guess is the best way to say it. And we're coming to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, on Shrove Tuesday, or Pancake Day, as some people call it, in early March. The weather's nice, and we're ready to go. And I have loved to be chatting for the past several years on various topics, and so this is just a continuation of chatting with a good friend. So Anne, come on board.
Hey, Bruce. Thanks
Hi
for that
there. There she is.
intro.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's it's odd because you've interviewed me a couple of times in the past, and now I'm interviewing you. And you have a brand new book out called Deep Freeze, which I hope people will buy. It's a really exciting new mystery that takes place on the other side of the world. So that's
So,
just a little tidbit to
thank you.
get
And I
people
hope
thinking.
I have to do something because we always do it when we're doing a celebration.
Oh,
I
where's my hat? I don't have a hat.
know, right? Where's your hat? Party time because we're talking about the launch of a book. So that was just a, a little aside.
That's right.
Yeah, coming on Saturday. Just really, really excited. March 8th to finally get out this
That's
beauty.
beauty for sure. Love that cover. Yeah. And it's not your first.
No, no, this is actually the second in the Deep Mystery series, but it's my third novel, but my fifth book. So I have two nonfictions, one a nonfiction about living in Dubai, and one that's a collection of travel and expat stories.
Right. So is the maybe a telltale question will be, what do you prefer? Do you prefer fiction or writing nonfiction?
Wow, that's a really good question. I enjoy writing both. But probably my preference does lean toward fiction, um, because I can, take real life and put a little twist on it, and then leave people guessing.
Do you think you inherited a storytelling gene, or did this come out of somewhere else?
I come from a long line of readers. My mom and dad were both voracious readers, and some of my fondest memories are snuggling up on the lazy boy with my mom, reading, from children's books to Reader's Digest. She was a huge Reader's Digest fan, and going to the bookmobile. That would park at the Sobeys parking lot on Lacewood for anybody who's listening who's from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Those were the days, kind of thing. And so I think, and in early in my professional life, I was a preschool teacher. So I loved, my favorite time was story time. And I had done a little bit of acting, so love the sort of putting on the different characters and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I do tend to tell a lengthy story. I love details. Um, so yeah, I guess it came naturally, but it certainly wasn't any kind of a plan.
Hmm. Hmm. And it's those early years. I totally agree with you that if you have people around you who like to read, and there's always books in the house, and yeah, it does tend to come naturally that you would begin to tell stories yourself. So
Yeah, it's definitely a big part of my life, and like all my siblings love to read, my nieces and nephews, like there's always stacks and stacks of books everywhere. So it's a lot of fun to create your own, and you yourself know as a fellow author just the joy that comes from holding like an actual book in your hand that has your name on the cover. Like that never gets old.
it never gets old. It's always even a little bit shocking sometimes when you
Yes,
walk by your own bookcase and you think, oh, there's my books, or
right,
it is
right.
nice. And a lot of people who probably tune into you regularly might not know that you've actually written 5 books now.
Right. It's hard to believe that. And I think, you and I have talked about this before, because we've both, we started our writing careers, writing nonfiction, and, you with your travel writing, me with my PR writing, and I wrote lots of feature articles. And so, making that transition, but seeing that first byline was really exciting too. So.
And did you keep some of those early articles? Do you still have them in a scrapbook?
Every last one.
Me too.
Every last one, yes. Yeah. I'm just noticing we've got a few folks watching, and hi, Sarah. Sarah Butland is asking a question. She says, what was your favorite book to read silently and out loud to your students? Do you know what? Can I tell you, that is really an easy answer. And one of my best lifelong friends, who was also, we taught preschool together. If she's watching, Barb, shout out to you. And she'll remember this. My favorite book, and it might have been one of hers too, to read to the kids, was Mortimer. And it was a Robert Munsch book. And there was a wonderful, phrase that was repeated throughout the whole book, which is very, kids love that. And it was clang, clang. I won't do it the way I used to do it. Clang, clang, rattle, bing, bang, going to make my noise all day.
That's a great question too, Sarah, for asking, because once again, it's showing young kids, showing your students how important it is to hear books being read out loud, and to show the visuals, if there are any.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about your?
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, because you've done the 5 books and then you transitioned. Well, it was, what did you say, about 10 years from the date of the previous book, Deep Deceit to Deep Freeze. Yes. So it took a while, but now you're back into writing this series, and you've got the 3rd one in the series already planned, because I know you're going to Paris to do research. So yes. It's like, wow. But what about that gap? That's quite a transition.
Yeah, like I said, being like an author wasn't really in my game plan. I kind of fell into it, but the reason it's been 10 years since Deep Deceit was written is because I was crazy enough to start a publishing company in 2016. So Deep Deceit, which has just, if I can share, has just been relaunched. It's been re-edited, thank you, Marianne Ward, and redesigned to match the theme of the series, and relaunched. So look how gorgeous is that?
Nice.
Yeah, so it's thank you, Grace Lamler, for creating the look and feel for Deep Mysteries. So so Deep Deceit launched in 2015, and then I had a situation that brought me back home. So I lived 23 years as an expat. I lived in Florida, and then Dubai, and then Thailand. And then I moved, after 23 years, I moved home in 2016, and started looking after my mom, who, was elderly in her 90s, and started a publishing company. So it didn't leave me a whole lot of time to write. So last year, this had been like burning in my mind, the next story, for so long, that I really felt driven, I guess, to get it done. And at the time, Marianne Ward who is a local editor, a very, very talented editor, had worked on several books with me. And we had this epiphany one night that, maybe she might like to lead some projects. So she's the associate publisher of OC Publishing, which allowed me last year to sort of take a little mini sabbatical and finish writing Deep Freeze. So, yeah.
And what about that interest in mysteries? then? Where do you think that might have come from? Were you one of those kids that read, Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys type of thing, or?
Yes, I love Nancy Drew. So I always say, if somebody asks, they always want you to talk about, what are comparables, when you're marketing your book. And I always like to say, although, modern, more, younger readers may not recognize, but it's sort of a Nancy Drew meets Kinsey Millhone. So if you're not familiar with her, one of my favorite cozy mystery authors is Sue Grafton, who did the Alphabet Mysteries, and Kinsey Millhone is a female detective, and she's just very down to earth. And so those were sort of my guidelines. I love reading mystery, always have. And when I sat down to write my first book, I didn't even realize I was writing my first book. It was Mental Pause, which is also a mystery, but it was my first novel. And I was suffering from the symptoms of perimenopause and had a horrific night sweat. And I just got up and started describing what a night sweat was. And it just started flowing. And all of a sudden I was writing about this character named Abby, who winds up on trial for murder. So it just started coming out. And I guess because mystery, courtroom drama and that kind of thing was always my all-time favorite genre. So it just happened naturally. And then when I get these crazy ideas, there's always sort of a mystery element to them. So, I lived in Dubai for 4 years, and it's as, exotic and confusing and mysterious as you might think. And so some of the things that actually happened while I was there have been rolled into both of these books.
I was going to mention that too, that because both Deep Deceit and Deep Freeze take place in that part of the world, I think, and being maybe because I was a former travel writer, but I never went to that part of the world myself for any assignments, I was drawn in from page one for both of these books, because what you've been able to do is to take, for us, a very exotic destination and make it understandable and page turning. So that's to your, what's the word, finesse as a writer, because you're not only placing the characters in a world so far away, but you become invested in the character because the character is like you. The character is from North America, or in your case, Susan, the main character, is from the United States. But living abroad, so you were able to, you did write a nonfiction book about Thailand. And these two are based in the Middle East. She, meaning Susan, the protagonist, is now off to Paris. So why is that?
Yes. Oh, you know what? Again, I think for me, I find it, and a lot of people don't need to, and there are certainly some places I've written about that I haven't been to, but I love to immerse myself in the environment or the scene of my characters. And so I tend to draw on places I've lived or traveled to, and Paris is one of my favorite places in the world. I've been 3 times. And thank you to a woman who was my mother-in-law, who was also an avid reader, who actually kind of was one of the triggers behind my March 8th International Women's Day, traditional launch date. It's also her birthday. But the next in the Deep Mystery series was supposed to be a standalone book called Paris at Last. And it revolved around an older woman who, becomes a widow and has loved France her whole life. And finally, now her kids are all grown and, her husband has passed. And finally she moves to France to live in Paris, as she's always dreamed of. So it's a story that's been ruminating or percolating for several years. And I wanted it to be the next book that I worked on, but I also didn't want to, now that I'm rolling with the series, I thought, you know what, I can turn this into a deep mystery.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that while I was writing Deep Freeze, or before actually I sat down to finish it. And so wove in a character in Susan's life that is her aunt, who has a little apartment in Paris. And so I don't know spoilers here, but she does eventually decide, okay, I'm going to go and visit my aunt in Paris.
But I think it's also a smart thing, in my opinion, for you to do, to continue the series using an idea that you've had, as you say, ruminating or percolating for years. But readers want to know, after having read Deep Deceit and Deep Freeze, well, what happens to Susan? I mean, we want to know, does she move abroad from Dubai, or does she stay in Dubai, or maybe go to Australia? But so I guess I hope I'm not giving away that secret of Paris. But
no, not at all.
It's I feel the same way about some of my books, that I want certain characters to continue, and you'll know when it's time to retire that character, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I will, and it's not a secret. I love that, the ideas are still coming to me, and I have tons of notes, and I will. This is, don't all writers have notebooks? So this one I started with my last visit to Paris, and this is going to take a while to decipher it. But this is what happens, when you're an author and everything gives you scene ideas, right?
Yeah.
So this is on the back of a paper bag.
Yeah.
In Paris. So there's lots of notes in here. And funny, you mentioned that Susan is from the US. So, that's established in the first book. But I'd really, and again, because, a lot of me is folded into these books, I really wanted to find a way to bring her to Nova Scotia. So in the Deep River, I think, is the working title for the next one that'll be set in Paris. And I'm working on a way to bring her to Nova Scotia.
Good.
So it'll turn out that she has, Acadian ancestors, as I do. So there will be at least a fourth book. So we'll see what happens then.
Well, it is exciting to write about destinations where we used to live, maybe in your case, or in my case, have visited. But there's something really special, in my opinion, again, to write about where you're from and your background and your heritage, and I guess to say the place you might love the most, which for you and I is probably Nova Scotia, Canada. I mean, there's nothing like it here. And we can, when we write fiction and we use Nova Scotian settings, we're talking from authenticity and experience.
Oh, absolutely. And it'll be a nod to my mom, who passed last year, who was a Landry, and was Acadian French, and born in New Brunswick, and I was born in New Brunswick, but we moved here to Nova Scotia and I was 3. So for me, it's and I guess that's going to be fun, for me to bring Susan home, technically, just as I came home 9 years ago. So she's kind of following a little bit in my footsteps, quite honestly.
Right.
And as long as people are enjoying it, but I do have, and as most authors, I do have tons of files with other ideas. But I'll probably continue to write fiction.
Have you ever wondered or thought about how or where you got the drive and ambition to do what you do? Because not too many people would say, I think I'm going to become a hybrid publisher, or for that matter, I think I'm going to become an author, because these days, with so much online that seems to be instant gratification, and I can do this and I can do that and I can become an expert. But I think you do need drive and ambition to become a person like that, accomplished at that.
Well, hopefully I'll be accomplished at some point in my career. I started this a little later, in life. But I think that I call it passion, maybe not necessarily drive, but I guess passion drives you. And the fellow authors who are watching us, and I see Lana's hopped on. Hi, Lana Shoup, who I know is working on her next book too. So I think that it's one of those things, and it's eventually sunk in for me that I can't do anything else. There's nothing else that makes, like, I work from home, and I have, for 15 or more years. So it wasn't the pandemic that, made me work from home. I love working from home. So, and this, it's the love of what I do, whether it's for my own books or for, the authors that I work with, that every morning after I put on that pot of coffee and pour my cup of coffee, I come into my office, and there's really no question. Like, and it's not, I don't even have to try. It's like a magnet, I guess. So the passion drives me, helping other people put words on paper and bring their stories to life. I love the logistics of it all the moving parts, working with a creative team, for my books and for others. So, I mentioned Grace Lamler, who had designed, the Deep Mysteries look and feel. I work with a very brilliant, and she does other projects for us as well, David Edelstein, who's an amazing designer who does our accessible ebook conversions, which is really important. Marianne, who I mentioned. So it's such a team and such a family, as you know, there's a lot of moving parts. So even though writing, and I know I've probably gone way off tangent with what you asked me, but writing is a solitary endeavor. But again, as you develop your characters, they really become part of your world. So I don't find it solitary necessarily, because you're interacting with these individuals who are great colorful characters or whatever. But then all of the other things that go on in the background bring really interesting people into the fold as well. So, and I meet
Absolutely.
like you.
Yeah, well, thanks. But it doesn't, as you say, it doesn't have to be a solitary pursuit, for sure. It can be solitary. It can be lonely when you're the one making the deadlines. You're the one that has to write that next page and see it to the end. But we're very fortunate in Nova Scotia to have quite a vibrant literary community here, whether it be the Writers Federation of Nova Scotia, where your book launch will be this coming Saturday,
Yes.
at 2:00, by the way.
Yes. Thank you for that plug.
Okay. But also just the overall artistic community in Nova Scotia, in the Maritimes, in Eastern Canada. We are storytellers, and I'm so glad to have gone to some of your workshops to meet others. It's been a bonus for me because, like yourself, I lived away for many years, and when I came back, it was a brand new transition in some ways. So let's talk about, just see we're getting close to time here, a little bit about the book launch and what people can expect at that.
Oh, sure. And I guess, the book, it is a crime fiction. It's a mystery. And as Bruce said, it's set in Dubai. And there's an accident at Ski Dubai, and a chairlift detaches from the cable and comes crashing to the ground. And Susan Morris, who's the main character, is with a friend teaching her how to ski, and it's her friend's husband that just happens to be on the chairlift.
And I'm going to interrupt you there, Anne, because we do have time for you to do a little excerpt.
Okay.
A reading, if you could. I think that would be nice.
Okay, I will do that. And for anybody who is interested, after I pique your interest, you can pick up a copy at WFNS on Saturday. So this is an excerpt. As I mentioned, one of Susan's friend's husband is injured, seriously injured in an accident at Ski Dubai. And He's hospitalized, of course. And so this scene is at the hospital. He's been in the hospital for a few days, and Susan had convinced Pat to go and get arrested, and now they're returning to the hospital. Susan and Pat returned to the hospital with the hope that Barry was rested up and would remember something, anything that would shed some light on the situation. As they exited the elevator and passed the nurse's station, they heard a scream from the direction of Barry's room. Susan took to a sprint, almost knocking over the duty nurse as she hurried out from behind the desk. Anu was sprawled on the floor just inside the door of Barry's room, holding her hand to her head, blood seeping through her headscarf and onto her fingers. There were bells going off in the machines and a staccato rhythm coming from the heart monitor. The nurse pushed past Susan, barely looking at Anu lying on the floor as she rushed to Barry's bedside. Pat arrived behind her. "Code blue," the nurse called out and pushed an emergency intercom on the wall. "He's in VTAC, no pulse. We need the crash cart." She started chest compressions. "Move," demanded Frank as he pushed into the room behind the team who wheeled in the cart. He grabbed the paddles. "Charge!" He waited for the beep. "Okay, clear." He placed them on Barry's chest and shocked him. Barry's body shuddered. Frank paused. "Charge again." "Clear." He laid the paddles on Barry's chest and shocked him again. There was a reassuring blip and Barry's heart regained its natural rhythm. Pat stood paralyzed, watching them from the corner of the room, while Susan helped Anu sit up. "Don't try to stand," she said quietly. She gently unwrapped Anu's scarf and winced at the sight of so much blood. She allowed the bile that rose in her throat, swallowed the bile that rose in her throat, bunched up the scarf, and held it to Anu's head, applying pressure to the wound. All eyes in the room turned to them. "What the hell happened?" Dr. Pettigrew snapped. "I was just coming to see if Dr. Barry was okay," Anu choked on a sob. Susan tightened her arm around Anu's shoulder. "It's okay. Just take a deep breath and tell us what happened." Anu took a shaky breath and coughed. Then she winced. "I think she's going to need stitches," Susan directed her comment to Frank, "and probably a CT scan." "Is that right?" Frank growled. "First, she needs to tell us what she was doing here before I call the police." "I didn't do anything," cried Anu. "Frank, she's our maid," said Pat, finally finding her voice. She's already traumatized by the break-in. Give her a chance to explain." Pat turned to her maid. "Anu, go on. What happened?"
And you
Indeed, what
truthfully
happened?
begin to find out exactly. Yes, for sure. So, who are some of your favorite mystery writers? Just as we're about to finish
Sure.
off.
Yeah. I've as I said, been reading since I could open a book. So a lot of my favorite authors are kind of older. Like P.D. James. I love P.D. James and Adam Dalgleish, one of her main characters. Patricia Cornwell and Kay Scarpetta, who is a medical examiner. Hopefully, as my series progresses, I will introduce maybe some more of that ilk. And as I mentioned, Sue Grafton, and one of my new favorites, who's a local author, Anne Emery, who writes mystery, the Father Burke mysteries. So I just, and of course I read a lot of local authors, as I'm trying to find new people to interview, and memoir. I love reading memoir as well. So.
And I know you've interviewed Donnelly Moulton too.
Yes,
For example.
yes. Oh, and I love Pam Callow, who's
And
also
Pam Callow.
oh yeah, her books are amazing. Yeah, yeah. Set in Halifax, and based on a young lawyer, who gets embroiled in mystery, just like my Susan Morris. Sometimes unwittingly, right?
Unwittingly, but goes and forages her way ahead into things. So I guess we'll wrap it up there now, Anne. If you want to mention again where people can buy Deep Deceit and Deep Freeze.
Yes.
Go ahead.
If you go to ocpublishing.ca/Anne-Louise-O'Connell, it'll show all of the hang on, I'll go up here, all of the books, and then links to purchases, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indigo, hopefully Indigo, chapters Indigo. And of course, also this Saturday at WFNS.
Right. And I know you're a strong supporter of indie bookstores
Yes.
in the province and in New Brunswick. So if you'd like to mention any of those.
Oh, yeah. We're always very thankful. They will be, all of my books and all of OC Publishing titles are at Dartmouth Book Exchange. Shout out to the folks there. Thank you for your ongoing support. Partridge Island Publishing in St. John will be opening a new bookstore called The Right Cup, WRITE. And so,
which is exciting for sure,
yes,
because they're going to focus on
local, yes,
maritime authors. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an incredible place. So make sure you visit. They have Mental Pause and Deep Deceit, and we'll do a road trip soon and bring them copies of Deep Freeze. Yeah, so
go and buy.
Buy.
Go and buy and enjoy and buy Canadian, folks.
Yes.
You know what happened just today. So
Yeah.
it's time to be even more patriotic than
Yeah.
we could possibly be.
Yeah.
And it's been fun. It's been a delight, and so glad to do this for you and to call you a good friend. And best of luck this Saturday for sure.
Thank you ever so much, and thank you everybody for joining us today, and for Bruce, for you to come in and please co-host or guest host anytime. Love to have you do that.
It's been my pleasure, especially because you're on the control board and I'm not. So you can sign us off at any time you like.
Well, I can make you keep talking, but yeah, we'll both say goodbye and see you next time on the author journey.
Yeah, thanks for watching, folks.
Thanks again for joining us.